So it was just like an underlying passion that was sitting there, and I knew I was going to go back to it. I knew it was there waiting for me. I was going to go back to it. I just didn't know when. Hey there, welcome to another episode of the Willing Equine podcast. I'll be recording this episode in my car, so the audio may not be super clear, and sometimes I have my kids with me, so if you hear a little bit from them, I apologize, but hopefully you can still enjoy the podcast. I'd love to hear from you after you listen to the podcast, so feel free to comment on any of my social media platforms or email me or even send me an Anchor voice message. Well, guys, it's here, 2020. I can't believe it's another year, and it also isn't just another year. I should say January 1st in particular is the birthday or anniversary of TWE, and this will be our 3rd year anniversary, and I'm very excited to get to celebrate TWE's 3rd anniversary with you guys. I did and didn't plan each new year to also be TWE's New Year's or anniversary birthday, but it works out really nicely for my OCD type A person, where the first of the year is the anniversary and it just rolls over. So works out perfectly, easy to remember, and every new year is a new anniversary for TWE. So I'm really excited. And I had a special request in this podcast episode, to share a little bit more about my journey to this point. Up until when I started TWE, and then kind of the journey with TWE since it started. Kind of a behind the scenes look, not so much about the horses, yes, about the horses, but about me in particular and my journey with the horses and how we got here. So, I guess it really depends on how far I want to go back, but I guess I'll tell you a little bit about myself in my earlier years. I grew up with horses, as many of you guys know, since I was very young. I was in the competitive hunter-jumper world and then the competitive dressage world. But I also was homeschooled as a child. I grew up educated from home with my I'm the oldest of 5 siblings, and so, my 4 siblings. And none of them are horse lovers. Actually, I take that back. My sister, that's right under me, she loved horses growing up. She doesn't have horses anymore. When she went to college, she sold her mare and really dedicated her efforts and energy and passion into her education outside of the equestrian world, which was financially probably the smartest idea. But she hasn't picked back up the horse thing yet. And then my sister under her, so my youngest sister, she's actually Candy's owner, so she does have she loves her mare Candy. I wouldn't say that she's super dedicated as far as she's she's not as horse obsessed as I am, let's put it that way. Her passions are in makeup artistry, so she does special effects makeup, and she's excellent, amazing. She goes to Comic-Con and does a lot of special effects makeup there, and anyway, so she's got a big future ahead of her. And then I have 2 brothers. That one is a missionary in Cambodia, and he lives there full time with his wife. And then my other brother is working on figuring out life. He is really good at computer stuff. I don't even know. I feel like I'm going to butcher it if I even say what it is that he does, but gaming and programming and stuff like that, that's his area. So he's really good at that, and I'm really excited for his future as well. So that's a little bit about my family, and my parents are they actually, at the facility that I work out of, it's a family-owned facility, and so they live there, and they built that facility, and they are very passionate about supporting their kids, and have they've always gone above and beyond for me and taking care of me and really helping support my passion, but at the same time they've always been big believers in not just handing things out. I've always worked for what I've wanted, and they've instilled a strong business sense in me and a sense of self-accomplishment and really working for what you want and being dedicated to it. So there's a strong work ethic that runs in my family, and so I'm really grateful for that, and I love my parents for that, and I hope to instill that in my kids one day, which kind of brings me along in my timeline, my growing up timeline. So I met my husband really young, and actually we were 10 when we met, and we started dating when we were around 18, 19, and we got married when we were 20. And then we had our first kid when we were 21. And after that, let's see, there's a 4-year gap between my oldest daughter and my son. So that would make me 25, I guess, 25 for my son. And then, about 2 years later, I had my youngest. So 27-ish. I think I had just turned 20, because I can't remember. Anyway, I can't do math or birth dates or anything, but my youngest is 2 right now, 2.5. So I have an 8-year-old, a 4-year-old, and a 2-year-old, and my 8-year-old is about to turn 9, because her birthday is in the middle of January. So I feel very not prepared to have a 9-year-old, so that I don't ask me how I'm coping, because I'm not. I'm just like, I hope we all survive being parents and children of parents that don't feel like they're old enough to be parents. But so as many of you guys know, like I mentioned before, I grew up around horses and was very competitive. I actually had planned on competing in the Junior Young Rider Nationals in dressage. I had purchased a horse that I had planned to take to international competition, but things didn't go according to plan. Actually, I only got to show him one time, and he did extremely well. We were in the high 70s, and which is like really high for dressage scores, but I showed him a level way below what he was doing, because he was prepping for intermediate 1 and 2, and but I was showing him at like 3rd or something like that, or I can't even remember, but it was just kind of getting warmed up together, getting each other, getting ready to show together competition. And that was the last one we did before he broke his jaw. And when he grabbed a hold of a blanket bar that was bolted onto the front of his stall, which now you will never see anything bolted to the front of my stalls anymore because of this incident. But he was tall enough that he reached his head over the top and got his lower jaw hooked under the blanket bar, and I guess he threw his head straight up or something hard enough to snap his jaw in half, which he survived. He had his whole jaw reconstructed by some amazing surgeons, but he was never quite the same after that, especially since when he woke up from his anesthesia, he had a really rare reaction and he had to have an emergency tracheotomy because he couldn't breathe correctly. And then after that, he had to have tieback surgeries, and then also we discovered that there was a broken off piece of drill bit left inside of his jaw when they took out all of the screw plates and everything, and that festered and rotted his jaw and had to be removed. So he had a bunch of surgeries that were not fun and really compromised his the structure of his face, and also really caused him a lot of chronic long-term pain. And he ended up being euthanized after I had him for 3 years. 3 years of a lot of surgery and pain and suffering and trying to rehabilitate and trying to get back to riding and switching to bitless. He was actually the one that showed me that even the quote-unquote heavy-handed, stubborn, strong horses could ride bitless. That was definitely him at the time, but I didn't know any better. That was just how he was trained, and he wasn't actually in collection. He was just plowing into my hand, and anyway, it was a whole thing. I could go on and on for a long time about that. I'm very much involved in a more classical dressage approach now. But so he was pre my youngest daughter, and so I was 6 months pregnant with my oldest daughter. I was 6 months pregnant with my oldest daughter when we ended up putting him down. His name was Romeo, and that was really traumatic for me. I had a lot of hopes and dreams centered around him and our working together as a team, and having to say goodbye to him was kind of like burying my dreams. So that was really hard. And I had other horses at the time. I had a retired thoroughbred, and I had a very awkwardly built and difficult to work with colt that was like, he must have been like 3 at the time, maybe a little bit younger, that I had raised. I had bred him and raised him, and that was a whole other learning experience because I should never have bred his mom. It was one of those things where I loved his dam, and I thought she had a great personality and she was fantastic, and I wanted to, she should have a foal. And it was good timing in my life. So I bred him when I was still just starting to get competing with Romeo before his injuries. It was right after I had brought him in from Holland. And so I bred her, and because we wanted a foal, we wanted that experience, and we loved her, so she should have a foal. Well, yeah, that was just a whole learning experience. It was very expensive, very time consuming. The sire was just top of the top. He was Grand Prix dressage Hanoverian. He was gorgeous, had gorgeous foals. But her conformation wasn't what it should have been, and they weren't necessarily a flattering combination. But I didn't have none of the professionals around me really. They kind of were not involved, mostly because we didn't ask them for their opinion, which we should have. But even the breeder, I feel like maybe should have stepped in and said no, because this is not a good fit. But I don't know. We're obsessed with breeding horses in this culture, in this world, and so we bred her, and the foal, I loved him. He taught me so much, but he had some serious stuff. Actually, when he was 18 months or so, he put his head through a fence and internally decapitated his head. It's a very rare thing for them to survive through. I should have snapped the spinal cord, but it didn't. And he happened to survive through it, but he was never the same after. So anyway, that's all to say that after that, and then he tore a suspensory, and there was thing after thing that happened with him, and he was conformationally very weird. He had a strong roach back. He was very short backed, very short necked, upside down neck. It was just not built very well. He ended up being also having an incident and having to be put down. Let's see, it was probably almost 2 years after my warm blood was put down, Romeo was. And so at the time, I kind of was just getting through having my first child. So when you have your first kid, for those who don't have kids, it's world changing. Everything changes. Your focus changes. You're just trying to figure out how to do this new thing called motherhood. And so it was very different having my first child, especially being as young as I was, and there was other stuff going on as far as with my husband and his work. He had a very stressful job at the time that consumed a lot of him, and so all of my efforts and energy and emotions went into raising my daughter, and my warm blood had just been put down, and my thoroughbred was retired, and my colt was still too young to ride. So I just kind of let them sit, and I didn't, I just stopped taking lessons, and I had my horses, but we were just taking a break for a while. But then I had to put my colt down, and then my thoroughbred soon after. So he was retired and he was older, and it was one of those things where we could try and change his homes, try and find him somewhere new to go, but he was old enough and had enough health conditions that it seemed at the time made the best sense to also go ahead and let him rest, since his companion was going to rest as well, and we had no other horses on the facility, and I didn't want to move him and put him through that trauma at such a late age with his health conditions. So that was really traumatic for me, putting my warm blood and then my colt and then my second ever horse I'd owned, my retired thoroughbred, to sleep, all really close in time. And before anybody, I don't know, there was a lot there. I could go on and on and on about why we made the decisions we did, and the pros and cons, and you really had to have been there to understand what was going on, especially with the warm blood. And so I just, hope you guys can trust me that I tried to make the best decision I could for my horses at the time. I don't know if it's the same decision I'd make now, but it was at the time the best decision. I didn't think anybody else could take care of them the way that I could. There were so many horses out there that are perfectly physically fit and young and built right and all of that, and don't have health conditions, that are looking for homes. It didn't seem like a wise decision to try and find them a new home, and then they would be at risk of ending up somewhere bad. And then also with their health conditions, they needed specialized care. So it was the best decision at the time for them. But anyway, so that happened, and I kind of swore off horses for a while. Actually, I said I was going to, and I said I was going to take a break from horses because I couldn't deal with it anymore. I couldn't deal with loving something so much and then having to say goodbye, and then back to back to back. So that only lasted, though, 5 days. So I swore off horses for 5 days. Then my family decided that they wanted some casual trail horses. So these weren't going to be my horses. I was still taking a step back. I was just going to help them find some horses to keep on the property and that they could trail ride on the weekends. And you have to remember that this was a very different time of my life. My opinions on horses and my approach towards working with horses was very different. There was such a thing at the time to me as a recreational, just trail horse that you just got on every once in a while and rode around and then put back out to pasture. There was also such a thing as a horse had to have a job. It didn't make, why would you just leave a horse sitting in the pasture, or why would you just own horses just because? That's a waste of, horses to let them be pasture ornaments and leave them just sitting out there. That's ridiculous. And there was also a very strong sense of value that was attributed to the horse depending on their purchase price and their bloodlines and all of that. And all of these things have changed a lot for me. So as I'm going through this kind of story, you need to understand that my horsemanship journey has changed tremendously over the years. And some of the actions that I might have performed when I was younger or more naive, or just in a different mindset towards horses, and having been influenced by a very competitive and a world that used horses as sports equipment or machines, my decisions were influenced by these, because these were the peers that I was around. These were the the professionals that I was taking advice from. These were the people that were influencing my actions. So, like I said, now I don't think I would have put, certain horses to sleep that I had, because, well, one, I have more tools at my hands as far as how to rehab certain things. I also have positive reinforcement, which I didn't have then. So my difficult, unruly colt that was aggressive, or even my warm blood that had become extremely aggressive in the end, to the point where he had to be walked with a nose twitch and a chain and possibly sedated at the end. He was so angry and in so much pain, which at the time I didn't fully understand the concept of trauma and chronic pain, and just there's so much I know now that I didn't know then, and the vets didn't know, the trainers didn't know, and nobody knew around me, at least not to the extent that we know now. And so, decisions at the time were the results of lack of information, and I'm sure in 10 more years, I'm going to look back at decisions I make today and be like, man, if only I had known. So, we can only do with what we can with the information we have, and we make progress as we can, and just make the best decisions you can at the time. So I try and have compassion on myself for certain decisions that I made much earlier on, and as much as I try and have compassion for other people that make these decisions that maybe I wouldn't make now, because they're where they are in their journey, horsemanship journey. That doesn't mean we can't say something. It doesn't mean we can't try and educate people. It doesn't mean we can't say, that I guess offering the suggesting to help, or suggesting alternative approaches to things. But there's a strong difference between compassionately trying to help somebody and judging them. And that's kind of where I try. I'm not super successful at it all the time. I get too passionate to the point of where I judge people sometimes, where I'm like, how could you do that? How could you do that to that horse? And I try not to do that. I try to be compassionate towards where they are, but at the same time freely offer to help, and freely offer ways and for them to seek their own information, and for them to educate themselves in a loving and compassionate way. This doesn't mean that we can't have our boundaries. It doesn't mean we can't say that that's abuse and that's not. It just means that we have to understand that people are evolving in their own ways, that their horsemanship journey is changing every day, just like ours has. I don't know anybody that hasn't done something, or done something or not done something that they regret later on in their horsemanship journey. So we need to have that compassion for other people that we would hope people would have on us. So that's kind of my little insert there. So as you're listening to my story, you understand that there were decisions that were made that I would not make now, or there were, I don't know. So anyway, back to the story. So I got my family some trail horses, and actually Tiger was one of those, and then later on Pumpkin was one. We actually had some other horses too that didn't stay around. They did for a while, but they ended up finding new homes, or I found them new homes. One mare actually, she's with a really good trainer friend of mine who now trains with positive reinforcement as well, which I'm super excited about because she really needed that. But I had sold her to a excuse me, a lady that was interested in doing dressage, and this mare had been sold to me to do Western, but for trail riding, but she really wasn't. I think I could have eventually helped her through it, but there is something to be said for that. Some horses are not cut out for certain things. They won't ever probably enjoy it like another horse might. So this was one of those things, and so I sold her to this lady, and thankfully when later on down the road this lady couldn't keep her because of a health problem that showed up in their family, she offered her back to me, which I couldn't take her back, but I found her another home. And then there was some other horses. Let's see, there was another mare that It was a very long and involved story. Chronic lameness that the vets had not been able to find. I spent so much money and so much time trying to find the lameness in her, where it was coming from. Again, this is another case where I feel like now I know more, and I feel like I could help her now more than I did before, but unfortunately that's kind of a burned bridge as far as getting her back. Her owner has not been receptive to help or anyway, she was trying to find her a new home at one point, and I offered to take her back, but I couldn't pay full price for her, and that was a huge knock on my moral, I don't know, just something happened there. It was very stressful for me and very, I'm still very upset about that whole situation, but so hopefully my hope is that she is in a really good home and they're taking care of her. But this is one of the reasons I am very cautious about rehoming horses, even to homes that you feel like are going to be the best possible home for the horse. You just honestly never know. People, they change. People, you never know somebody. I mean, think about all the relationships you've had with close friends, and think about, growing up, and you had friends for years. Sometimes they were your best friend, and then things just something changed, or you thought you knew them, but now you don't know them anymore. And so when we sell horses, and when we give up ownership to horses to these people we want to trust with their horses' well-being, and we feel like it's going to be a good home for them, and there's just that risk involved. I'm not saying you should never find a home for a horse, but really great caution needs to be taken, and that's why I really like the idea of free leases. And anyway, you can hear more about all of that in some of my other podcast episodes. So I got my family some quote-unquote dead broke trail horses that would take care of them, and the idea was that we would just get to go spend time as a family and go out riding together whenever it worked out. But since I can never leave anything alone as a recreational thing, I have to take it all the way, and since I was responsible for purchasing these horses and keeping up with them, and since I had, since a very young age, been determined that I wanted to be a horse trainer when I grew up, and that even though I was taking a break, supposedly, from having horses, and the whole thing with my warm blood and colt were, even though those were traumatic events for me, and I wasn't sure where to go, and then I had my daughter and everything, but things were starting to settle down, and so I just was like, you know what, I'm going to get my horse fix by going out there once a week and going out to the ranch and working with these horses and keeping them tuned up and just keeping my skills, and all that, and I'll get to enjoy them, and I won't have to have any obligation, I won't have to compete, it'll just be low-key, and I won't get too committed to them because they're going to be my family's horses, not mine, so I won't have that emotional connection to them. Yeah, right. So it took a little bit, but actually so the horse shopping thing kind of took some time. I ended up buying over time some different horses for this kind of Tiger's whole story kind of overlaps into this, because she was supposed to be the horse that my husband and my father rode because she was built for it and all of that, but we figured out she had a lot of trauma centered around her training, and she wasn't safe for my novice husband and father to ride, so I ended up going on the hunt to find them a horse, which is when I found Pumpkin. And then that's also when I found out I was pregnant with my second kid. So this would be my son, and my daughter would have been 4 at the time, my oldest. So when I found out I was pregnant with my son, everything kind of continued on. I actually had started teaching some beginner lessons at this point too. I was teaching just some friends of the family, just some beginner lessons every once in a while. And I did this to replace my job. I had nannied for a while. So while my daughter was growing up during those 4 years, I had nannied for a family for a while, and that was a great job, but the mom ended up putting her kids in they got old enough so they were in preschool and everything. So I stopped nannying for them just because time moved on, and I didn't really want to continue nannying. So I needed some extra income, so I started teaching some beginner lessons. And one part I forgot actually is that while I was going through the whole thing with putting my warm blood down and being pregnant with my first, right before I got pregnant and right after we got married, so when I was 21, I worked at a boarding kennel, a dog boarding kennel, for a while. I think I was there for almost 2 years. And during that time, I also got certified through an organization to be a professional dog trainer. So I had kind of, while the whole thing with my warm blood was happening, and I wasn't sure whether I was going to get to keep working with horses, but I knew I was eventually going to go back to it. But in the meantime, it seemed like a good idea to get focused on training another species. I love dogs, and I was working at a boarding kennel, and I figured it would benefit me later on, which it did greatly. And so I had started training professionally with dogs and working at this boarding kennel for a while. But then when my daughter was born, I left that job so I could stay home with her. So I had that job, left the job so I could stay home with my oldest. Then when she was a little bit older, I think she was about a year, I started nannied for them, I think for a year or two, and then I started teaching some beginner lessons. And then I got pregnant with my son, and I continued to teach lessons during my pregnancy all the way up until the end, actually. I think I was even out. Yeah, I remember almost all of my pregnancies, I was at the barn the day of that I went into labor or the day before. So I worked up until, and I was very dedicated to being with the horses, fully 9 months pregnant and ready to have a baby. And actually I went 2 weeks over with all of my kids, so almost 2 weeks over. So I was very pregnant. So I had my son, and I stayed home with him for a while, but I continued to go back out to the barn and just kind of continue what I was doing, just checking on the horses, working with them as much as I could, and getting back in the saddle as soon as I could. And let's see, after that, this is a very detailed account of my life. After that, I got more intense about teaching lessons, and so I started doing that a couple days a week. And that's when I started thinking I'm going to get back into professional horse training. And at this time I was still traditionally training for a little while until I started finding positive reinforcement while my son was still pretty young. So it must have been, you know what, I must have started, I'm trying to remember the timeline. I must have started with positive reinforcement prior to getting pregnant with my son, or right as I was getting pregnant with him. Actually, I'm really confident that's the case because I remember different things. Yeah, so I started before I was pregnant with my son, with Tiger, but I was still recreational or teaching lessons occasionally, and I hadn't integrated into my lesson program yet. I was just kind of experimenting with it with Tiger and Pumpkin. And then, yeah, after that, it really just started continuing to grow. I started teaching more lessons. I started to really explore using positive reinforcement more in clicker training. At the time, I was less involved with what I now call like a consent-based approach, where I'm really wanting the horse to be autonomous and to really have free choice or choice in their training, choice and control in their training. And it was more so about clicker training and still achieving results, achieving being able to teach lessons, achieving being able to train certain behaviors, achieving getting the horse to do what I want them to do. Then as I was getting more involved and I started getting way more excited about this whole thing and clicker training and the possibility it had to just change and transform the entire equestrian world, and what the doors it was opening, and how it had impacted my relationship with Tiger, and how it was changing my outlook and my relationships with my horses, and everything was changing, and my passion was really reignited, and I was so excited to get back into working with horses. And I was at a point in my life where my son was getting old enough and that he could be with a babysitter or with it was actually his grandmother a couple days a week, and my daughter was old enough she could either come with me or stay with her grandmother, and just I could be more independent and working with the horses more. Although they did come with me quite often, they would often be playing on the front porch of the barn while I was working with horses, or playing in the sand. Pack and plays were my favorite. my ultimate tool with having kids at the barn is pack and plays. Pack and plays everywhere, and bouncy seats. And then the other thing would be like jumpers. The toys that you set the kids inside of, they're like the saucer. That's kind of what they call them, is like a bouncing saucer entertainment center. Those three things were the ultimate in strollers too. So I had 4 tools at the barn all the time that I could have kids in and keep them entertained and keep them safe. That was a big thing. They had to be safe, away from where the horses could access them. So then I was getting really excited about this, and I really wanted to help people and bring this idea to the equestrian world, to working with horses. It becomes so much more mainstream in working with dogs and even other species in the zoos and wildlife centers and the marine animals, but horses not so much. So I started TWE in 2017, January 1st, 2017, with the idea of really bringing this new way of working with horses, where you could have a willing partner, a horse that really wanted to be with you and really wanted to engage in the training, and it could be a positive experience for both the people and the horses. I wanted to bring this idea out, and I saw TWE as a way of achieving that. Now, at the same time, I actually was pregnant. I got pregnant with my youngest, my daughter, and that happened right before I launched TWE on January 1st, 2017. I think I was maybe 4 to 6 months. I can't remember exactly how far along I was. I must have been, let's see. Yeah, I can't remember the math, but I must have been like 6 months along when I announced that I was going to launch TWE on social media on January 1st. And I'm just going to keep saying that, January 1st, 2017. And I knew that it was going to mean that I couldn't be as aggressive as I wanted to be as far as getting TWE off the ground, and there would be some learning curve. But I figured it was fine, because at the time I wasn't taking horses on for training, and most everything I was doing was social media based anyways. So I stuck with going ahead and launching it, and I did lessons up until I had my daughter, and I did lessons a couple days a week. I just kind of continued on that same path where I was working at the barn a couple days a week and having my kids at home, and I was homeschooling them at the time as well. I was homeschooling my oldest. My youngest, my son wasn't quite old enough yet to start school, but I was homeschooling my oldest daughter at the time, and then I was at the barn working a couple days a week and really running everything from social media. I started doing consults. I started doing just email consults, video consults. I started really putting out YouTube videos, and I just spent a lot of time with the social media aspect, and just part of the week at the barn working with the horses and teaching lessons. And I continued that up until my daughter was born. And then when she was born, I was home for a little while, although I'm pretty sure I returned back to the barn almost the same week. And by the 3rd child, you're like, just keep on moving. Just have a kid, keep going. And I did return back to teaching lessons after that, but I wanted to turn my focus to really building an online, like a long distance lesson program with people that were really dedicated to working with positive reinforcement, clicker training, and consent-based training. This is when that idea started to really evolve for me. And a lot of my local students at the time were a little bit more interested in the traditional lessons that I used to be teaching, which was completely fine. They had been with me since I was teaching in a more traditional way. And as I started to evolve, kind of my training program evolved, and I tried to make it slow integration so it wouldn't shock anybody. And it was a slow integration for me as well, so it wasn't something I was holding back. But things changed in my students' lives, or they just kind of weren't as interested in the clicker training aspect and all of that. And but most of my students, it was more that something else in their life was really taking hold, and so they wanted to dedicate more time to that. And since I only had a couple students at the time, it wasn't a big deal. So I started to really focus on building an online group or a long distance group of students that were very interested in learning the type of training that I was interested in teaching. And so anybody that wasn't super interested, we just kind of amicably, I can't even speak. What was that? We very nicely, I'm just going to not even try it again. We nicely parted ways and everything was totally fine. And I just started focusing on teaching people that were really interested in learning this new way of working with horses. And a lot of those students were long distance. But then I started taking on, as my daughter got older, boarding clients and clients that wanted more hands-on training. So they would send their horses to me and they would take regular lessons in between their horses training. So the horses come and stay with me for months at a time, and their owners would come and take a lesson or multiple lessons a week as I was working with the horses when they weren't there. And so it's a really intense training program to kind of jumpstart everybody's training. And I have always wanted to take horses in for training, but I have never really been prepared or set up for that, especially with having young kids. But finally, I was in a position to be able to do that when I decided to enroll my youngest daughter in a very, very small private school. It's like a 2-room schoolhouse, and there's multi-ages in each class, and it has a really strong Christian foundation, and I know all the teachers personally. I know all the students personally. Like, it's a really great school. So I felt very confident in putting my oldest in a school environment, and then also my son as well as he got there. And so then it was just me and my youngest. And so I had time to be able to start taking horses in for training. And that's when I feel like things really started. My education and my business and everything started to really take hold and really started to evolve into something bigger. And the social media aspect was the foundation. It's where I started. It's how I built my brand, my image, all of that. It's how I connected with like-minded people. It's what really pushed my education, and it was so inspiring, and I met so many people, and I am still to this day, like, Instagram is my stomping ground, and I love everybody I've met there. I've made my best friends there, and to the point where we fly to go visit each other, and I love it. But it's been a whole new learning experience, and a fascinating one, and one that I'm just absolutely hooked on. Working with clients hands-on and working with their horses and seeing the different struggles in the day-to-day horse person's life, and going and doing consults. That's something else I do, is I travel and do consults, and I started doing clinics as well. So I travel around the country and eventually, hopefully, internationally, to do clinics, to teach, to help people to work with their horses in a new way, and to, whether they're beginners or just wanting to learn more about training this way. And this whole aspect of TWE has really just taken off, and I'm amazed at the amount of people that are interested, and how dedicated they are, and how I don't know, even my online group of students, my long distance students, I feel like they are my local students too, we have a personal relationship. They can text me and message me and email me anytime, and we do lessons every month, if not more. As far as they send me videos and I do lessons with them, and we have an online where we a discussion group, and everybody gets to know each other. I have 3 students in California that didn't really know each other prior to training this way and also TWE, so becoming my students, and now they all go visit each other and help each other train, and they're kind of each other's accountability partners, and I think that's fantastic, and it's so exciting that I've been able to be a part of that and help bringing people together that are like-minded. And anyway, so I'm just so excited for the future and where things are going, and I feel like I don't even know why. I don't know that anybody's really going to be interested in my story and how I got to where I am. But I hope so, because I just recorded this whole podcast. But I feel like maybe it'll help inspire people and let them know that it's okay to take detours in life. I feel like from when I was young and in a lesson program and competitive riding, so when I was from like 20 until I was maybe even younger, so really started around 19 is when my warm blood got injured. So when I was 19 until I was 20, I don't know what, 4, yeah, it would be about 24 to 25, maybe even later, you could say 26, I took this giant detour. Oh, and I even forgot about something else I did during that time. I took up professional makeup artistry. So I was doing wedding makeup for a while. I did that for about a year. That was another part of my detour. So that must have happened. That happened after the nannying. And yeah, see, I took this huge detour where I left my roots, my passion and my core of horse training and horses, because life took me on a little bit of a journey, and I feel like this journey was so needed, though. It wasn't just like that I left it and I shouldn't have. I left it and I should have. And it wasn't an intentional. I didn't intentionally leave it just because I felt like it. It was just that I had started having kids and things weren't working out as far as with my husband's job and the distance driving to and from the facility I had available to me, and just the emotional aspect of it too. And I didn't really lose my passion for horses. It just kind of got funneled it down into a very like soft passion. So it was just like an underlying passion that was sitting there, and I knew I was going to go back to it. I knew it was there waiting for me. I was going to go back to it. I just didn't know when. And so I was exploring these other, I feel like they were replacements. I was trying so hard to replace the core passion that was there with a tiny passion, because I do love makeup, but not like I love horses. And I do love dogs, but not like I love horses. And I do love kids and nannying and all that, not like I love horses at all. So it was like I was taking these little side paths, these little I was exploring these other little minor passions to see if they would fulfill what I was looking for, and I needed to fulfill them or explore them for the learning experiences that happened, but also because it really helped solidify that horses were it for me. Like, come hell or high water, horses were it. And so I was just waiting. I was waiting for the right time. God had a path for me to follow. God had a purpose for all that I was doing. I can't tell you how frustrated I got at times, how depressed I would get. I have dealt with depression to various degrees since I was about 18. And so there were times during that whole period where I was so depressed and struggling. And this wasn't this happy-go-lucky joyride from start to end where I was like, oh, I'm just going to go explore all these things and I'll eventually come back to horses. No, it was like, I really want to do horses. Why can't I do horses, God? And so frustrated. I guess I will try this other thing and maybe it'll be okay. And it was for a while, but it just never was it. And so, but it was also so important for me to learn that patience and that dedication, and to see other parts of what I could possibly do, and to explore other parts of me, and my personality and my strengths and weaknesses, and to learn things. I think if I had just continued on the path I was going, there was no way I'd be where I am today. So maybe it would have been better or worse. I don't know. All I know is that it wouldn't be me, who I am right now. And I'm grateful for it, where I am right now and who I am right now. And that's not to say that it's easy. There are huge struggles in my everyday life. I deal with depression really strongly still, even though I have reached it, so to speak, just because of my personality type, and there's other stuff physically for me that I struggle with, hormones, all of that. Like there's stuff. Everybody's got our stuff, right? We've all got stuff. So this is not like happy ending, and from this point on there was never a day in my life where I wasn't sad or struggling. But I feel at home. I feel like this is it. I feel like this is where I'm supposed to be. And maybe that'll change. Maybe in the future it's going to look like a variation of where I am now, which absolutely probably will. I would hope so. So I'm not staying stagnant and never evolving. But I do hope that it involves horses into the future in some capacity. And I'm really excited to see where TWE goes and where it can evolve. And I feel like it's this living, breathing thing that I've helped create, that God has really blessed. And I'm so thankful for all of you guys, that everybody who's listening to this podcast right now, everybody who's ever liked a picture on Instagram, or commented on a video on YouTube, or emailed me, or private messaged me, or anybody that's a student of mine, or has done a consult with me, or has put a horse into training with me. I can't tell you how thankful I am for you. And you have been a part of this. You have been a major part of this. Your contribution has made this possible, and made the future possible as well. It has made it so that I can reach more people and help more people. And I definitely couldn't do it by myself. I certainly could not do this by myself. And as much as it's like, I might be the face of TWE, I'm the one that's talking on this podcast, I'm the one that does the trainings. I really hope in the future that it's not, I hope to have other trainers to work with and create something bigger. And I don't know. It may be mostly, like people see me, but what I wish they could see is all of you guys. And I know that sounds so like mushy gushy and like, I don't know, cheesy, but it's true. Like my students and you guys teach me as much as more than I hope to be able to teach you guys. Every time I have a horse come stay with me, I learn something new, and it evolves my horsemanship journey tremendously. Every time I have an online student that emails me, hey, what about this? I have to go through the process of thinking about what I would do, and maybe I've never even encountered that problem before, and so I have to really dive into what I know, what I've read, what I've experienced. Sometimes it even requires me to go consult other trainers that I know, that I respect, and that teaches me, and that helps me evolve, and that helps me bring more information to other people. So you are a huge part of this, and I really hope that you feel that. And I really hope that you enjoyed this podcast episode, and just kind of getting to see a behind the scenes, a journey, how I got to where I am. And I feel like I kind of overshared a little bit, but I feel like maybe putting it out there will help people understand that this is something that has been hard worked for, and isn't just about, I don't even know about me making money or me growing a name for myself or anything like that. That it really has been about a passion and a dream, and about the horses, and it's always been about the horses. And I also hope that by listening to this podcast episode, you can get a sense of being inspired to continue your own journey, even if it's not looking exactly like you thought it would. There has been so many times where I had a plan, where I had something that I knew I was going to do, I knew I was going to accomplish it, and I was going to go out and get it. And it just crashed and burned. And I was so angry and so upset and so disappointed, and I would become depressed, and angry with God. And that in itself, I think that was part of why it didn't look like I wanted it to look, because I needed to learn how to let go of things and to go with the flow a little bit more, and to trust God and his purpose for me and what he wanted for my life. I'm turning 31 on January 3rd. And so I've still got a lot more years. I'm actually a little bit worried about what the next 30 years are going to look like. I can't even imagine, if compared to the last 30 years, like what are the next 30 years? Heck, what are the next 5 years going to look like? I'm a little bit scared. But if I've learned anything, I've learned that it will turn out okay, and that God does have my best interest in mind, and that even if I sidetrack away from the horses for a while, even if it's not looking like I want it to, that underlying passion, that drive will still be there, and I can still go back. Even if I have to step away for a year, maybe something happens and I have to step away for a year, I can go back. Like, it's okay. Nothing is the world is not going to end if I can't do something for just a month or two. Although it feels like it sometimes. Every moment feels like the most important moment in our lives, and I struggle with that. But I really hope that I can take this sense of trust in the journey and in the evolution and in the process into the rest of my life. And I know I'll have ups and downs, but I hope that this podcast episode could really helps comfort and inspire, and also kind of give you a behind the scenes look for those that are interested in learning more about the journey of TWE and how I got here, and maybe it'll help you on your own horsemanship journey. Thanks so much for listening. If you'd like to find out more, head to my website, thewillingequine.com. On there, I have a really extensive blog. I'm a very prolific writer. And I also have an FAQ page. And the FAQ has all kinds of things. It has questions and answers about training and about my training specifically, as well as just general about working with positive reinforcement. There's also sections on there about health and behavior. So all of that. I'm also on a lot of different social media platforms, Instagram, YouTube, Facebook, so check those out. And I'd love to hear from you, so don't hesitate to email or send me a message.